Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session of the Model European Union. The European Union is a very strange animal, as you probably already know fairly well. I'm a member of the European Parliament, a member from Hungary. I belong to Fidesz, which is a part of the family of the European People's Party. And what I want to do is say a little bit about my own work. I've been here since Hungary joined in 2004, and throughout my entire 7.5 years in the European Parliament, I've worked in two committees, Foreign Affairs and Constitution. I want to say a little bit about my work in these committees. Foreign Affairs is fascinating because it's always sitting. It's almost impossible to find the day when the Foreign Affairs Committee is not sitting. And we really deal with every part of the world, except, of course, the European Union itself. Insofar as the European Union has a foreign policy, which to some extent it does, the Foreign Affairs Committee is the place where this is discussed. My own personal work has concentrated in the first instance on Serbia. The Parliament publishes a report on Serbia every year. I'm the shadow for the People's Party. I work together with the Liberal rapporteur, Jelko Kacin, Slovene, and this of course means I go regularly to Serbia, which is not that difficult after all, it's right next to Hungary. And my task is to see what might be added to the report, to see how the report may be augmented, things might be changed in it, and generally to keep up with what's going on in Serbia, which incidentally I find quite fascinating. If any of you are from Serbia, then you will know what I'm talking about. There is a transformation taking place. Now this brings me to a slightly wider topic, and that's the question of enlargement. Generally, people will argue that enlargement has been one of the most successful policies of the European Union, possibly the most successful policy. Obviously, as a Hungarian, I'm a beneficiary of this. If Hungary had not joined the European Union, then of course I wouldn't be a member of the European Parliament. This follows fairly logically. What the idea is that the European Union as a concept, as a practice, as a set of institutions, as a set of procedures, basically ensures that conflict, which is a natural and normal event, takes place within institutional norms, and there are proper mechanisms universally understood for conflict resolution. I have to say that actually, if you go back right to the beginning, that's to say the post-1945 period, the European Union has been enormously successful in this, and Europe is now a zone of peace. So in that sense, in a way obliging future member states to go through a complicated process of transforming their legislation, their practices, even to some extent their institutions, is a part of becoming European in the sense that the European Union represents Europe. How far Europe goes, well, that's a very difficult question. I think that 7.5 years ago there was no answer to it. I think by now an answer has sort of evolved or emerged, which is that the Southern Caucasus, that's to say Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, are potential future members. Russia at the moment is not, and to the east of that, let's say Kazakhstan, not likely to be recognized as a potential member of the European Union. Turkey, of course, is a big question. It's unresolved. The negotiations sort of continue, but really not at any very great speed. That leaves Switzerland, Iceland and Norway. Iceland is negotiating and may or may not become a member of the European Union fairly soon. And of course the other Southeast European countries have all been given what is known as a European dimension. So much for foreign affairs. I could talk a great deal about Middle East, Africa, Far East, China, Russia and so on, but I'll leave that to one side for the moment and talk about my work on the Constitution Committee. And the Constitution Committee, you may think, is oddly named because the European Union doesn't actually have a constitution, but it does have a very complex system of treaties. So the Constitution Committee doesn't deal directly with the legal side of it, but it really deals to some extent with the strategic element, and this is what my work has been on primarily. What does it mean that we're integrating, and what kind of institutional regulatory consequences follow from this? To some extent, which is quite difficult actually to put into a report, is what is the legitimating narrative for European integration. I would say here that in the last 7.5 years there has been a change. I think the legitimating narratives are weaker. Many people, in a way, say, well, what's the European Union for? They don't see it. And to an extent, and that's part of the reason why I'm very glad you're here, our message is not getting through, that the European Union is important, partly for the reason that I suggested, that it's a brilliant method of conflict resolution. There has been no war, and that's pretty good if you know European history. I think also important is that there are transfers, subsidies if you like, solidarity from the richer regions to the poorer regions that helps the poorer regions to accelerate their economic development, which of course then benefits the entirety of Europe because it enlarges the market within which European economic actors function. I would say also, and this is of key significance to anybody who comes from a small country, those who come from large countries have difficulty recognizing this, that small countries require a higher level of security than large countries do, simply because of their size. We have less power. If you compare Hungary, a country of just about 10 million people, with, let's say, Germany, which is sort of around 80, you can see there's an enormous disparity. So what the European Union does is to ensure that small states have, or certainly should have, equality of status, perhaps parity of esteem is the best term for this, that they are recognized as equal actors in the European Union process, which is something that was absolutely not there before the Second World War. You can even argue that really since the Congress of Vienna 1815, the history of Europe is not least about large countries intervening in the affairs of small countries. This is now much rarer. It hasn't disappeared entirely. The temptation of power, especially on the part of large countries, is that precisely they should push small states around. And my question in a way is, which maybe you might think worth debating, is that will this remain in being? Are there actually trends around which point in the opposite direction, a strengthening of member states, a strengthening of the nation state, where nationhood, which we all thought was something of the past, is re-emerging as a central concept of legitimating power at the national level, and therefore, to some degree, pushing the European processes, not into the background completely, but down a notch or two. If that trend, which is given the term intergovernmentalism, continues and the so-called community method is weakened, then I think the smaller states will really have to watch very carefully as to what kind of a Europe is emerging for the next decade, which of course is overwhelmingly going to be your task and your problem rather than my generation's. My generation has made many mistakes, but at least I think we can proudly say that we brought into being a Europe which is working. Have a good session. Enjoy your time in Strasbourg.